All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Day, me and Nick here will be doing our preview and prediction for the Michigan Wolverines. A very successful season last year. You know, what a difference a year makes at the end of 2020. People were calling for Jim Harbaugh's head. A year later, he's in the playoffs. Pretty wild turn of events. Flirted with the NFL a bit this offseason, but it's going to be his 8th season. Harbaugh decides to stay at Michigan. 61-24 record. Did just win that Big Ten crown. Sharon Moore, he's going to be taking over at offensive coordinator. He's been on the staff since 2018. Matt Weiss as well. I think they'll share that job. Second year on staff. He was a QB coach last year. He replaces Josh Gaddis. We'll get to that in a minute. Jesse Minter is the defensive coordinator. He was at Vandy last year, but his brother sends him another assistant, Mike McDonald. He got sent from the Ravens. Minter, he was with the Ravens for 4 years. John took him back, sends him another one. So obviously a great guy to be around in the Harbaughs. I don't think I've ever seen a Broyles Award winner, though, leave for the same job elsewhere. That's what Josh Gaddis did this offseason. Usually they leave to become a head coach, but he left to be the OC at Miami. Jim flirting with the NFL, Nick, seemed to mess something up. But what I heard was, I guess the administration maybe made some false promises or something to Gaddis. Not exactly the full story, but obviously some massive losses, including that one that's pretty shocking.
Jim Harbaugh's time in Michigan has been very interesting to me, right? People are always disappointed, it seemed, with Michigan's performance. They couldn't seem to get over the hump against Michigan State or Ohio State, but they beat both those teams, or they beat Ohio State last year. They win the Big Ten for the first time, make the playoffs, and seem to settle some nerves for this team in Ann Arbor. They had struggled for a while, but they get into the playoff for once. But they lose Gaddis to Miami. Like you said, I think the university promised some things to both the head coach and the offensive coordinator that neither of them received what they had promised. Jim Harbaugh flirts with the NFL. He had a successful stint with the 49ers last time he coached at that high level. But he stays in Ann Arbor. He's back for another season, 8th season at the helm, and looking to build off such a successful season last year where they go to the playoff for the first time in Michigan's history.
And again, Mike McDonald, he was so good that John took him back to the Ravens, but sends Minter back down. So I think they'll be all right at defensive coordinator, at least from a mindset standpoint. Those two coordinators were so good last year. But looking at this offense, Cade McNamara, 2,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, 6 picks. Smart with the ball. He complemented the running game quite well. Over the final 3 games, though, he failed to top 169 yards in any of them. But 2 of them were the biggest wins of the season. So he was clearly a game manager, did very well in that ceiling. But the ceiling is pretty capped, I think, with McNamara under center. J.J. McCarthy, 5-star, got a lot of talent. I think they need to capitalize on this run right here. I think he'll eventually be the starter. It's a pretty easy slate in the first month of the season. McCarthy, I believe, will eventually take over. What do you think about this QB battle? And do you think McCarthy should be the starter sometime here?
It's definitely very interesting. I've seen some articles online stressing that McCarthy should be the starter. Some people are worried what Michigan's backup plan is if Cade McNamara can't live up to the expectations that he has. I think you hit the nail on the head by saying he's a game manager. That really what he is. Michigan's gonna have to focus on running the ball because you're not gonna get a superstar performance out of McNamara. He's not gonna make a lot of mistakes. He's not gonna turn the ball over a lot. He's very responsible with the ball, but you're also not gonna get a guy who's gonna light up the scoreboard and put up 400 yards on passing. So you have to kind of find that balance at Michigan, where is McNamara going to be able to lead you in the tough schedule in the Big Ten, or are you going to have to go to McCarthy, who can add a little bit more variety to the offense?
Yeah, he's clearly the better talent, impressive arm, nice ability to rip it, much better athlete. Made a big mistake versus Michigan State, though. He fumbled. They had a great touchdown throw in that same game, so obviously you got to take the good with the bad. They tried to get both of them on the field, but that didn't always work out, and that game was evident of it. But last year, the Wisconsin game, for example, I was like, this is where we're going to learn how good this team is on offense, because year after year they have a pretty respectable running game. They run into a team like the Badgers, and they can't throw for anything whatsoever. Last year, though, they proved that they could. I was highly impressed with what McNamara did in that game. The passing game had a big pulse, and I believe they only ran for 90-some yards in that game, so the passing attack did a lot of work. Finally, after many years, Michigan got something out of their passing game against those tougher defenses. So I'm definitely wanting to see if that can continue this fall. McNamara did give them that at least, so I don't know if he's the best option for them, but he did not play himself out of the job last year by any means. And talking about that running game, it was one of the nation's best. They lose Hassan Haskins, but they get back Blake Corum. Very fast guy, runs between the tackles with ease, going to hit that second gear very quickly. 952 yards, 11 touchdowns, 6.6 yards per carry. If he didn't have some nagging injuries towards the end of the year, he would have definitely hit the 1K yard mark. Haskins again gone, but Donovan Edwards, a former 5-star, played sparingly last year. 36 touches, 249 yards. That doesn't include the 75-yard passing touchdown versus Iowa. So he's a guy that can do a little bit of everything. This backfield, not worried one bit, despite losing a very productive player in Haskins. I love the duo they have here for 2022.
I think the potential with Edwards is definitely there. 3 touchdowns on the ground last year, averaged about 5 yards per carry in his limited sample size, 36 attempts, like you said. I think he adds an interesting dynamic, the former 5-star. Like the speed he possesses, I think he has real opportunity to make some moves on the ground. Like you said, he also had a reception touchdown against Iowa. I think Edwards is a very talented player. Him and Corum could be a two-headed monster in Ann Arbor and dominate on the ground.
What I really like about this offense is they made a CFP run last year without star wide receiver Ronnie Bell, and they also get everyone back around him. Bell, 401 grabs, 26. Fuck. Doesn't make sense. 401 yards on 26 grabs in 6 games in 2020. Last year, he had 1 reception for a 76-yard touchdown. He also had a 31-yard punt return in that same game. Then he tears his ACL. He was off to a very hot start in week 1. And it was pretty impressive how good this passing attack was without him, because you really thought they were doomed. Guys like Roman Wilson, 400-plus yards. He stepped up. Cornelius Johnson, a 50-50 ball guy, can really high-point it with strong hands. He was the leading pass catcher last year from 2021. Andrell Anthony, 6 receptions for 155, 2 scores in that Michigan State game. That was half of his production for the year. He didn't play much, but he did catch a pass in the final 7 games, and he had exactly 1 reception in the final 6. So this is a guy they're going to look to get a lot more out of this fall. Mike Sanriso, he's a two-way player, 312 yards on 20-plus grabs. He's a two-way guy, so they might use him at corner a lot this year, but we'll see what happens. I think they got plenty of depth, and I really like Eric All at tight end. He was second on the team with 38 grabs and 437 yards. What are your thoughts on this receiving core? Gets everybody back and gets a boost with the All-American Ronnie Bell.
I love Ronnie Bell's talent, but I get a little concerned with a guy coming back from ACL injury. It's interesting to see if he can be able to keep up that same speed he possessed before the injury. You know, he scored that 75-yard touchdown in his single catch last year. Pretty impressive to see before he went down tragically with that injury. Interesting to see if he can sort of recuperate that and get back to that energy. I like what Cornelius Johnson can do. I like his jump ball abilities, 627 yards last year leading the team. I think he has some serious potential this year. I like to see them target him a lot early in the season.
And rounding out this offense with an offensive line that won the Joe Moore Award last year as the nation's best. And I really thought they were up for the test versus Georgia. From a physicality standpoint, I was flat out wrong. They got bullied, but this is still a phenomenal unit. They replaced 2 starters, the 2 Andrews. But they do bring in Victor Owomadi. He was a second-team ACC center last year, one of the nation's top run blockers. That's big news for an offensive line that was that good to add a player like this. A lot of experience, though, still. Ryan Harris, he was a second-team big-time honor himself last year, left tackle, and Trente Jones. He was very good in his appearances and as an extra blocker. He's going to slide in here right tackle. 87 career starts total for this offensive line. I don't expect much fall off, and I think they could potentially get even better with the add of Owomadi from Virginia.
Owomadi was a great pickup at center. I think this offensive line will be strong, like you said. You're looking at the tape against Georgia. It's hard to compare considering how strong that defense was and how dominant they basically dominated everybody last year. Look at the tape against the Ohio State game. They really impressed me in that game, in that rivalry matchup. So this offensive line should be as strong as it was last year, and I have no concerns of it.
Yeah, they also got Trevor Keegan back at left guard, so these guys are in good hands. I think this offense all around, I think that might be better. I think they're going to the insertion of J.J. McCarthy at some point is definitely going to lead to more upside for this unit. They were really good last year. They lose Josh Gaddis, but I do think they will get better. I think they have the potential to be probably that second best offense in the conference right behind the Buckeyes. What do you feel? Do you think a regression's in store, or do you think they'll continue to progress?
I think it's definitely depending on what Cade McNamara does. I'm really concerned with his play. If they switch to McCarthy in the season, that may give them a big boost. But I think they have the right pieces at wide receiver and running back, especially running back. I think Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum is such a great duo there. They can really ground and pound if necessary, and it can relieve the pressure on McNamara and let him sort of manage the game so he doesn't have to focus on making big plays because he'll have the running backs to bail him out. I think this offense will be strong. They had a decent performance last year. I think the defense was more of a standout, but this offense has a potential to be strong this year and make some good moves.
And looking at a defense that also helped lead the way, they were much improved this past season. Mike McDonald was so good for them. More zone-heavy approach. We'll get to the secondary in a second, but what I really like is this defensive line. They only returned 3 total starters on this unit. They lose so much talent, especially those 2 great edge rushers in Ojabo and Hutchinson. It's kind of a revamped unit, but with Mozzie Smith being the only notable returnee, he's a very key piece of this defense. 37 stops last year, 4 pass breakups. So he got his hands up often. I like Chris Jenkins, 6'3", 275. He's going to anchor another interior D-line spot. And Cam Good, they only picked up 2 transfers this offseason. Good was the other one outside of Owomadi. Coming from UCF, big-time ad. He's up to 6'2", 315, respectable interior pass rusher. He had 4 forced fumbles last year as well. He's been very productive in his career. I like this defensive line. I'm kind of worried about the pass rushing unit, though. Mike Morris, he's a senior. They're going to want to get a lot out of him. 6'6", 278. Taylor Upshaw, Jalen Harold. These guys are veterans. They're going to have to be leaned on to step up big shoes to fill nonetheless. How do you feel about this defensive line and the pass rush? First round talents.
I think it's certainly normal to expect a drop off from this pass rush, losing those talents in Hutchinson and Jabba. Like you said, Hutchinson, number 2 pick in the NFL draft, and Jabba would have been a top 10 pick if he hadn't injured himself during the combine process. But I like Mazi Smith, like you said. I think he has that veteran presence they need. He's going to be a leader on this team. I like where he fits in. I think he has real potential to step up. 37 total tackles last year. I expect a little bit more out of him this year. These veterans need to step up and make some moves because the younger guys are going to be inexperienced, not a whole lot of reps with them. Mike Morris, the senior, I like what he can do. I think he has some potential as well. He hasn't really hit the ground running yet in Ann Arbor, but he has the potential here to take that sort of lead role. But when you replace that talent, it's just so difficult to replace such a bona fide superstar in Aiden Hutchinson, especially David Ajabo as well, who really kind of blossomed towards the second half of the season. So I expect for the front part of the season, the defensive line might not be that strong, might take some time to get used to it. But as the season progresses, they might come into their own and be more dominant of a force.
The middle of the defense is kind of in the same boat. Junior Colson, he's a surefire stud in the middle. Not many proven commodities in this front seven. And that middle of the defense is in the same boat, But the rising sophomore, he's certainly going to anchor and do a lot for them. He had 61 tackles as a freshman last year. Depth is quite thin, though. They didn't look to add anyone in the portal. Lost Aubrey Solomon to Arizona. Michael Barrett, though, he's on the chart listed as a backup middle linebacker. More of a traditional outside linebacker, so if he's truly converting, that's not really great news. I have big concerns with this interior linebacking core. Khalil Mullings hasn't played much, enters his 3rd year. Other than that, Colson, though, they're glad to have him. They'd be in some real tough stuff if they did not have him. How do you feel about the linebacking group?
Yeah, you said it perfectly. Without Colson, they'd be in serious trouble. He is really the only leader in this linebacking core. Without him, they'd really be running with a bunch of guys who don't have experience and guys who we really don't know if they can really make tackles and make the big plays they need. Colson is good that he's there. He can be a leader there. He can step up a little bit. But the middle of this defense, I'm serious question marks. And I'm really concerned if they have the potential to keep up this year in the Big Ten.
Overall, I thought the front seven performed very well. Outside of the pass rushers, they stopped the run much better than they did in 2020 when they got tore apart. They didn't allow 200 yards once against the run. They did get close a couple times, though. Allowed 190-plus yards 3 times. They also got smoked by Kenneth Walker in East Lansing. But 3.5 yards per run allowed in the conference. That was really good numbers. They were god-awful 2 years ago, so very happy with the improvements they made on that front. And then the secondary as well. This is another part of the defense that really struggled, but it was much improved with a more zone-heavy approach. I think Jesse Minter is going to look to implement some of the same principles. It really benefited guys like Jermaine Green and DJ Turner, who was really good in press. Was targeted a bunch, but he didn't crack one bit. He was one of the top corners in college football. He's back for another dominant season, they are hoping. Safety, RJ Moten, he's destined to break out. Saw lots of time when Daxton Hill played in the slot last year. End of the year with a pick versus Michigan State and 34 tackles. He's going to step into a lead role, as will Rod Moore. A little undersized, 173, 6 foot, but saw ample time as a true freshman. I think they really like the starters they got in the secondary, Nick.
I like Rob Moore a lot. Like you said, he's a little undersized, but he had limited opportunities last year and still had 33 tackles for loss in the 11 games. I think he has real potential. I like what he can do. Like you said, I think they like what they have. They have the talent. They're replacing Daxton Hill, who was also a talented player. I think that they have what they want. They're going to be able to build what they want to here. They should stick with the zone defense. I think that's the right sort of format to be in for this team. I think they're going to be really strong under that. And I think they have a decent enough secondary, and that has a lot of upside.
Will Johnson, incoming 5-star. I'm very interested to see how they use him. He has a lot of experience in zone from high school. Should allow him to crack the lineup early. Very interested in his role. I don't know if they're going to make him be an outside corner, maybe play him in the slot. I think they're quite happy with his secondary overall, though, because they also got Cade. They also have Caden Colzar, a senior. He might be the nickel back. He's a great deal of experience under his belt. Also being a former safety, that's going to help. And earlier I alluded to Mike Sanderisdale. He's on my depth chart right now. He's pegged as a starter in the secondary, I think, at nickel. Regardless, again, I think they're very quite comfortable with what their options are at slot here. In worst case scenario, they'll just throw the 5-star into the fold. Overall, the secondary played very well against Ohio State. That big play offense couldn't find much of anything deep. They still had their 400 yards, but I don't care. They did their job. Only one grab of 300-plus yards. That's good versus them. They're not going to have the luxury of that elite pass rush duo this year. I think they're well prepared to hold up on their own. And also, they led the entire game against Ohio State, so they're throwing a lot. They certainly had their issues at times. The lack of personnel was exposed against Georgia. Nebraska had some great success with their tight ends. More good than bad last season, which allowed them to rank 27th in pass defense. A lot of big things from this defense. that I'm very happy with. And even though they only get back 3 starters, I think they're quite happy with what they have in 2022. Looking at the schedule and our prediction here for Michigan, I'm expecting a pretty good season from them. The first 3 games are kind of a joke. Week 3 is an ABC feature versus UConn. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and tune in. It should be an easy September, though. Perfect bye week right after the home game with Penn State, the host Michigan State. I think we'll pick up a win there. I should have beat them last year. That was a game they really let get away from them. Really good schedule, I think, this year. They could easily beat Iowa, especially since they won by 38 in Indianapolis last year. Don't ask me how Iowa's going to score to win because I'm not really sure. But I think the defense at home, especially in the secondary, they're going to be up to play a great game. They're going to have a giant chip on their shoulder. Kirk Ferentz, he's going to have these guys ready to play. Usually it's a very low-scoring game. The last time they played before the title game was a 10-3 Michigan win. So this team is certainly different on offense, though, for Michigan. So that should certainly give them an edge. They shouldn't just get blanketed, but I think Iowa will somehow win that game. I have Michigan here, 10-2. How are you feeling? I have them with losses to aforementioned Iowa and Ohio State.
I think 10-2 is kind of right where this team belongs. You alluded to the out-of-conference schedule, a bit of a joke. Really, not a lot of heavy hitters on that schedule, but they travel to Iowa City to play Iowa. It's always tough to play. The home crowd's going to be rowdy for that one. I think that Iowa can definitely win that game. We had on those points in the Iowa preview. I think across the board, this is a good Big Ten schedule. Playing Penn State and Michigan, having that bye week in the middle there is really huge for them because I think if you had to play them back-to-back, that might be a little bit more difficult for the Wolverines. But they get that much-needed bye week right between the Penn State and Michigan State game. I think they can easily win both of those games. The back half of the schedule, too, is interesting with Nebraska, Illinois, then Ohio State. I like the way this looks at 10-2. I think 10-2 is a good season for the Wolverines. Of course, if you ask a Michigan fan, they probably would prefer to be in the playoff again. That's what they expect this team to be after following last season, even though they lost so much talent. But considering the leaps and Ohio State has made this offseason, I think that they will take care of them in the rivalry game on the last weekend of the season.
Yeah, overall, I think the Michigan offense, they're going to continue to get better. The defense also gets back 3 of those starters, but I think they are pretty confident the guys will be stepping into the lineup because how many times over the years has Michigan had these no-name guys who end up being high-production players? That just seems to be a theme with them. They don't exactly recruit off the wall, but they have these guys who step into roles and do very well. Linebacker, though, it's quite concerning, as is the pass rushing group. But again, I have confidence in Harbaugh here. This team for years has had plenty of guys step up, and I think that'll be the case this year as well. They've also figured out the formula on how to use these DBs. Thanks to McDonald, Mentor is going to copy and paste that formula, I think. Fall off, yes, but not by much. Hopefully, I'm not wrong because this team has definitely disappointed in the past. I think 9-10 wins. They should certainly be in a near 6 bowl and potentially, the conference championship game if they can knock off Ohio State 8 years in. That can be it for today's episode, guys. Nick, as always, appreciate you joining me.
Thank you so much.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.